So executive presence is pretty much going into a room with confidence, having credibility, making an impact in a way that you're memorable, but more important that people feel like you're the one in charge and that you're taking care of them. So the three indicators are communication, appearance, and gravitas.
Welcome everyone to what is going to be an exciting episode of Untapped. My name is Todd Jason, and as always, I'm sitting here with my co-host, Lauren Weinstein, and we're both incredibly excited for our conversation today with Allison Kluger, who's going to guide us through a really powerful process of understanding the superpower of how to master our own personal story, among other things. And this topic is fully aligned with our mission, where we wrangle the most interesting and successful people we can find and dive deep with them to understand what has made their lives and their careers so extraordinary. Now, our goal is always to give you, our incredible listeners, at least one golden nugget of practical information that you can take with you to better your lives starting now. And I'm betting that today's session with Allison will require of you a bucket to catch all the golden nuggets, as her life and career are truly remarkable. So please take notes. Now, currently, Allison runs her own media consulting business, and she also lectures at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. She spent the last 25 years in broadcast media and entertainment, from network television to new media platforms such as electronic retail, interactive TV, and digital media. She's been nominated for 4 Emmy Awards and has worked with the likes of Al Gore. She's also taught classes with Alex Rodriguez and Tyra Banks. And her wide-ranging ideas about how to have more success and joy will have you feeling more motivated, more optimistic, and freer than before. And it's truly an honor to be speaking with her today. So without further ado, Allison, we want to give you a big heartfelt welcome, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. After that intro, I think my work is done.
We're out.
No, not going to get any better. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So happy to have you here for a few reasons. First, you are one of the most beloved people I know, by students, by your colleagues at Stanford. Everyone that knows you just says how absolutely wonderful you are. So happy to have you with us for that reason, and have everyone else be able to experience you as well. Second, I love you teach at Stanford Business School, but so much of what you share is way beyond best practices and strategy. It's really profound, authentic wisdom that's really life-changing. And so we want to get to some of that today as well. And also, as I was appreciating as we were preparing for today, we could fully have 5 separate podcast interviews with you. You have so many areas of expertise. And so we really tried to narrow it down today to give maximum impact. But I think one of the most powerful insights that you have is around how our stories are really our superpower. When we're able to share our story in a powerful way, that's really game-changing. And so you mentioned we should all have 5 stories in our pocket that can illustrate who we are and our values. Before we get into how to do that, can you tell us why that's important? What's the purpose or untapped superpower of having these stories?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you again for the lovely intro. And I feel the same way about you, Lauren. Thank you. We all have stories in our life. We just don't really know how to identify them. But to me, what makes us unusual and what makes us successful and beloved is what differentiates us from everybody else. So many of us are perfectionists, or we feel like we're the exception to the rule, we're the imposter. And we look at everybody else and like, oh, they're doing it so well, or it's so much easier for them. But the truth is we all struggle and we all have this negative self-talk. Stories are how you are able to let people connect to you. And it's how people can learn about you in a way that's easy to remember. So there's a fact, which is that you can remember maybe 3 pieces of data from any sort of speech, but you're 22 times more likely to remember a story in its entirety. And why I love that is that if you're meeting someone and they're advocating for you, or you're interviewing for a job, or you're meeting someone who you admire and you want them to maybe help you, if you tell a good story, maybe who you are, where you're from, what you care about, what makes you different, and what your goals are, if there's a story well told, they can take that story and carry it onwards to a secondary or tertiary audience. And so the great thing is we all have stories, and they're stories that only we can tell, right? You can't delegate your stories to someone else. So it's just a matter of being aware of things in your life that show who you are at your core.
I love that. And I think a lot of us, we would say like, I don't know what story to tell, or how might I use a story, or we're afraid of being seen as well, I think is a challenge. So if you were coaching someone, how to find these stories that they can share with others and how they might use them in different situations, what would you say?
It's pretty tactical. And everybody, you know what I've heard from a lot of people that I coach is like, my stories aren't interesting, or your stories seem so much more exciting. And the funny thing is, everybody's stories are interesting to other people, right? My husband and I have a joke that he must have heard my stories like 1,000 times at a dinner party, and either he's going to tune out or just show his enthusiasm. But our stories are different. They land on other people differently. So my first advice is think about the stories that you tell at a party. Think about what you tell friends or partners or a new acquaintance, or if you're in a place where everybody's listening and you're going around introducing yourself, what normally comes up is something that maybe is a defining moment for you. But if you need something that is a little bit more linear, I always say, write a list of the things you've done in your life. And maybe it's from maybe early teens. Maybe you were a student athlete. Maybe you're in theater. Maybe you did community service or volunteered. What was your first internship? What was your first job? What was a trip that you took? I'm trying to think. And then any kind of positions you've held. When you have that list, then I want you to look and see what's one story that happened to me during this period of time. Now, let's say you're in the swim team, right? And maybe someone got sick and they're like, you go in. And they're like, but that's not my race. Yes, but you're a good swimmer. Jump in and do it, right? And so you go and you swim this race. Well, that's a story in itself. What does it show? It shows flexibility. It shows resiliency. It shows panic. It shows saving the day. And even if you don't win the race, you did it. That story can be unearthed in so many different avenues. Just sharing something funny or scary, or at a job, saying, this is a time when I got out of my comfort zone and I had to save the day. And I was so proud of myself. So that's how stories are useful, and that's how you can find them.
That's perfect. I think Brené Brown is such a great example of this. I love her Netflix special, Call to Courage. But she also has very simple stories of her daughter in a swim meet, right? You wouldn't think, I don't think anyone would necessarily think to tell that story, but there's a really beautiful message that comes out of it. Or if someone's really afraid, we have physicians in our membership community talking to a patient and telling them a story about a time they were afraid, or in job interviews telling stories, or just it's a way to connect with people. I've found it's when someone's having an experience and you can relate to that and share a story, people do feel closer and more connected to you. So it really can set you up and give you more opportunity.
I think you synthesized that beautifully, Lauren. And the thing about it is connection, like you said. If you want to inspire somebody, if you want to reassure them, if you want to comfort them, if you want to give them some straight talk, a story that either has happened to you or to someone, it's a visualization of emotions and experiences. It's so much easier to take that in than just platitudes or facts.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that and actually dive a little bit deeper on this, because I think it's fascinating, this idea of having 5 stories. And do you recommend that we have these 5 stories that we can use to tell with people that we work with, potential colleagues, with our personal lives? Do these 5 stories, I'm just trying to understand how to think about this, right? If I do the tactical work, as you said, of getting these stories that really represent me in a variety of ways, can I then use those in a variety of different situations that can help me to connect and have more authenticity? Or should we think about having different stories for different audiences? How do you think about it? Just trying to get real practical with how to utilize this awesome information.
Maybe you can give us an example of one of yours too.
Yeah,
So,
it's a great question, Todd. Let me give an example of, first of all, just let me say 5 stories. I just say 5 stories because it's manageable and everybody has 5 stories. When I gave my seminar on storytelling, and I give it all around the world, I talk about storytelling and the power, and I give it examples, but I also share 5 stories throughout. And so at the end, I say, whether you realize it or not, I shared my 5 stories pocket. It could have been 10. I think I have a lot of stories, and so do all of you. But so the number is really incidental. But I think what you're trying to talk about is, how and when do you use stories and figure out how to use them and leverage them? So as Lauren asked, I was applying for a job when I moved from New York to San Francisco for a startup in the dot-coms, if you remember that. And my husband was going to Stanford Business School. And I was so bitter. I was leaving a great job and I needed to find a way to support us. And this woman and I took a walk and she said to me, Allison, what do you think is your biggest failure or the time that you didn't live up to your expectations? Now, I think all of us who have had a job have had to answer that question. And many times we say things such as, I'm a real control freak. And sometimes I work too hard or too long and I'm not as efficient, or I care too much. And we give these answers that we think are going to make us look good, but they're not as genuine as a real story. For some reason, I just told her about this car accident I had when I worked at Good Morning America. And I was on my first shoot in a different state. And I was 3:30 in the morning. It was dark out. I'm a New York City girl. I really didn't drive that often. I was afraid of getting lost. And instead, I lost control of my car and my car flipped twice. And I was in the middle of a field at 3:30 in the morning in Dubuque, Iowa, before cell phones existed. And I talk about how I got out of the car and I tied up my leg because I had lost a big chunk of my leg and went and flagged down a car and how scared I was. And that the worst part about this story was that I lied about the accident to Good Morning America. I said I had swerved to avoid hitting an animal because I was so afraid of my reputation getting ruined and that I messed up my first assignment. And so there was a lot there. And I don't know why I told this story, but it just came to me. And she said, I was in this really bad motorcycle accident. And I said, really? And we sat and just talked about our accidents and overcoming it, and it bonded us. And she hired me right after this meeting. And I swear it was because we communicated, we connected, I was vulnerable. But I think also she thought, I think I'd like to hire someone who knows how to tie up their leg and get out of a car accident. So there's a lot of things that this story did for me. It wasn't purposeful, but it showed how tenacious I am. I'm a survivor. I have a good sense of humor. I made a lot of jokes during the story, but also I wasn't afraid to share something that was personal and felt like failure at the time. And that is the purpose of a story. I think for your benefit, why are you telling the story? What is it telling about you? And so there were very clear elements of what my story was doing, but you're each going to have a story, whether it's a triumph or a time that you helped somebody or a time that you failed, but you overcame and learned a really great lesson, or a time you traveled and you learned something about a new culture and that broadened your scope of interest. It doesn't really matter. It just, what does the story mean to you? Is that helpful?
I got to say that, yes, absolutely. And I know you talk a lot about transparency and authenticity and having integrity. And I think a lot of people, maybe I know that I was, and maybe still am to an extent, scared to be that vulnerable and tell something personal and get below just the cognitive interaction and go to something that's true and more vulnerable. But that's where the connection lies, right? Is in that. And so when people come to you with that fear, saying, well, I get it, I hear what you're saying, but it just feels weird to me to somehow think about a story and then in the moment be able to use it and to connect emotionally, right? So how do we get good at this, becoming and being more vulnerable and authentic in the moment? Is this something that we can learn?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's also cultural. I think there's certain cultures that don't like to lean into vulnerability. It maybe signals weakness, or there's just an innate discomfort. I have so many international students. Lauren knows this here. We have international students at the GSB, and definitely some of the Asian cultures, that's against what they are and how they express themselves. But what I say is know your audience. If you're in a Western audience, they'll be more receptive to vulnerability. So there are different ways of telling stories. What I would say is that in my studies and in my research, the leaders of companies or the leaders of teams are leaning into a more outward-facing persona. When I was growing up in those early years of my early jobs, the CEO or the leader was in an office in the back, and none of us knew who it was. We were afraid of that person, just a name. These days, leaders have to represent their company or their business and kind of show physically the values, like they have to embody the values of their company. In that way, it is welcome to hear stories. We want to hear what kind of leader you are, what you've overcome to be here, that you've also been in our shoes. And so even though it might seem anti-intuitive, the more open a leader is, the closer we feel to them and the more we want to serve them well. And again, the underlying foundational thought is connection. Like, this is a real person. I just had in my class yesterday, Kevin Johnson, who is the former CEO of Starbucks. We all know Starbucks. And he talked about leadership and reputation. But he had a really big reputational issue back in 2018, where two Black men were racially profiled for not ordering a drink, and they were sitting in Starbucks. And he had to tell as a leader how important it was to be accountable, transparent, problem solving, and admit fault. And his first messaging was, this is reprehensible. It's not the barista's fault. It's my fault as the leader of Starbucks. And I'm going to find out all the information. I'm going to meet the two gentlemen, Rashawn and Dante, and I'm going to talk to them, and we're going to figure out how to move forward. He ultimately put out a video. He put out a statement. He met with them. He met with the police. He met with Philadelphia's governor. And then he closed all the Starbucks stores a few weeks later for racial sensitivity training. This is a leader who understood that the buck stops with him, and that if he says no comment or delegates it to someone else, it's not going to land well. So the trend, what I'm trying to say is openness, transparency, accountability, solve for fairness, let people feel seen and heard. And that's how stories help.
As we see in this example, right? You telling that story brings your point to life, and it says a lot about him as a leader. So through the story, it's creating a more vivid picture for us.
Yeah. I don't know all of you, but I'm a very visual learner. I don't know, Todd or Lauren, if you're...
I am too.
Yeah. So I'm not a great data person, and I will remember a couple of data, but I will remember an entire story. I mean, growing up, I'd see movies. I was a big movie buff. And one of my weird talents was I'd go back and tell my friends the movie from beginning to end. I don't know how they tolerated me, but I had a big memory for telling stories or reiterating stories. And I always wanted to bring people into the world. And I think that when you can visualize and understand emotions and get those nuances, it just makes these connections stronger.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm wondering, because obviously you're masterful at this naturally, and then you develop the skill and you teach it, right? So again, honored to be here with you. Are there tactics and techniques for telling a good story, right? Are there actual things? What's the software, the skills that we can learn to actually communicate more effectively?
I love that you're getting tactical, and I want you to all be authentic when you tell stories. But I have this kind of theory, which I call my cocktail party theory. And so I want you to think about a story that is easy to tell. You haven't trained yourself to tell it. So let's say, Todd, you go to a party one weekend and someone goes, oh, Todd was just in Costa Rica and he had this amazing story about a monkey. Todd, can you tell the story? And you're not really prepared, but you're like, yeah, let me tell you, like, this monkey jumped off a tree and onto my head and stole my food, and we chased him all around, and that was our evening. And it's a really funny story, right? Very low stakes. The next weekend, Todd gets invited to another party, and someone's like, oh, Todd, you got to tell that monkey story again. So Todd tells the monkey story, and this time it's a little different. He leaves out some lines. The order's a little different. He remembers where there were some laughs, and he exaggerates a little bit more, and the story kills. The next weekend, because Todd is so popular, he gets invited to another party.
Love this.
Todd, can you tell that monkey story we're hearing? And you're like, oh, okay. And then you tell it, and it's like, oh, this happened. And you're kind of quick because you told it a lot of times, right? So the point is, Todd has told the story at least 3 times. It's different every single time, but it's the same. Does that make sense? He figures out, what does the audience need to hear? What's the crux of it? Where's the humor? What's going to make people laugh or go, wow? And that's how you practice telling stories. So it's the stories that you have told before. This shouldn't be a heavy lift for you. If you're choosing to tell a story about work or travel or a family member or an incident or a failure, you've probably told it before or you've thought about it. So what I'm saying is I'm giving you permission to not memorize, to not make it formulaic or inauthentic. I'm giving you permission to just understand the point of the story and why people might want to listen to it. If you are presenting a story in a formal situation as part of a talk, then I encourage you just to keep practicing it out loud. But don't worry if you forget some words, maybe your head weeded them out, or if you change the order because you forgot something. Many times in a story, I'll be like, oh, and one more minute, I forgot to tell you this. And then I'll just add it. We are the maestros of our own story. No one's judging. No one's saying, oh, you didn't tell that story the right way. They don't know. So it's a freeing experience, but it's a creative, expressive experience. Does that help at all?
Yeah, it reminds me of like comedians, right? Before they're on the big stage, the Netflix special, they're going to all the small little venues to practice. Where do they get a laugh? So start choosing your story, and in low stakes situations, you can really practice, evolve it, fine tune. You become, like anything else, right? A masterful storyteller. We don't necessarily start out that way. And a lot of what we've been touching on so far is the content of our story. I teach, as you do, it's content as well as delivery. And so much in my work, a lot of people come to me saying, I want to have more presence. I want to have more executive presence, which go more into when we're sharing a good story or any message. Can you share with us a little bit about what is executive presence and how might we acquire more of that?
Absolutely. In a study that I cite, believe it or not, there are 3 kind of indicators of executive presence. Now, executive presence is pretty much going into a room with confidence, having credibility, making an impact in a way that you're memorable, but more important, that people feel like you're the one in charge and that you're taking care of them. So the 3 indicators are communication, appearance, and gravitas. And I'll break these down really quickly for you. The communication is in the delivery, like Lauren just mentioned. Do you pace yourself? Are you using vocal variety? So you're not speaking in just a monotone voice like this. Do you show passion for what you're talking about? And do you not use a lot of filler words like or because that indicates nerves and anxiety. Communication is also visual. Do you welcome people in? I'm so excited to be here today. If you come and you say, I'm really excited to be here today, it's a completely different message. So it's the visual. Are you having eye contact? Are you maybe walking and talking? And are you pausing to let people take in what you're saying? And then vocally, it's your pace. I always tell people there's no benefit of ever talking too fast. And we talk fast because we're nervous or we just wanted to get it over with. We're afraid of having the spotlight on us. But you make people nervous when you're nervous. And so what I say is in those 10 minutes that maybe you're presenting or telling a story, I want you to think about, even though I'm nervous, I'm excited, I get to share information. Maybe I'm an expert. Maybe I'm trying to get a job. This is my time to be the best version of myself. So communication is verbal, vocal, and visual, but it's also the charisma and a joy. There's a saying that I use, which is, no one kicks a happy dog. And so if you come on stage and you look like you're happy to be there, no one's going to want to bring you down. You're going to pass that joy on to them. So should I go on to the second one, which is appearance? Okay. So appearance is not that you have to be a supermodel like Tyra Banks, but what it means is, are you dressed appropriately and powerfully? And are you signaling that you are the right person to be giving this information or leading a group? This is just an anecdotal story. Lauren, you know who I'm speaking about. Our good friend, J.D. Schramm, told us about an education conference he went to. He's a fellow colleague of ours. And there were about 100 educators, and 3 of them were wearing suits, and everybody else was casual. Everybody gravitated to the 3 people in the suits because visually, they thought that was the leader. And I just think that's such an interesting way of how people interpret. So when you want to be taken seriously, if you want to look more mature, or you want to look very focused, intelligent, think about what your clothes are saying about you. especially in a very casual environment these days, which is saturated with a lot of people looking the same. So if we took a bunch of software engineers, they're all in maybe fleeces, or the women are in yoga pants and sweatshirts. There's nothing wrong with it. But when you have a higher stakes meeting, or you're meeting someone for the first time, I think you need to dress for the role you have, and you dress for the power you have. And I've seen this so many times that people think, I just want to be me. I don't want to be false, but you're signaling something. And so for me, whenever I do something important, I dress up half a step. And if they come and say, Allison, no one dresses up here, and I'll say, thank you for letting me know that I dressed up for you today, but duly noted. But I'm going to look powerful, and I'm going to look clean and kempt. And this is so interesting. In a study, what men and women notice about each other is not how pretty or richly dressed or how much makeup or attractive. When they're judging each other, what they're judging is, do you look like you can do the job? So a lot of that is about your energy. Are you frenetic? Do you look absent-minded? Did you dress quickly? For men, is your shirt really wrinkled? Are your eyebrows out to here? Men and women all have different grooming issues. So that's the second element of executive presence. Are you dressing appropriately and to signal power? And finally, the third one is gravitas. And I want you to picture a swan just gliding across a lake. And what do you think of a swan? Poise, elegance, calm, right? What's under the water? Little paddled feet, paddling furiously so that they can glide. That's what gravitas is. You can go and be speaking in front of people, or teaching, or leading, and you might internally feel crazy and nervous, but you want to give off the impression that you've got this. And if you don't know the answer, you say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find you the right person. It's not letting that panic we all have creep up. It's saying, I got this. And those are the three elements of executive presence: communication ability, appearance, and gravitas. And that trumps knowledge and experience, which is crazy, but true. You have to let people know you've got the presence before they spend more time with you, trust you, and then find out more.
So good. So clear and very tactical. One comment to that, and then one follow-up question. The comment is, I have a client who really took a quantum leap in his communication. He's a founder of a company, his ability to fundraise with his employees through personal growth work. He practiced mindfulness and breathing and lots of therapy. But what that did is it had him slowing down his pace. He seemed very in command. So people really trusted him and wanted to give him a lot more money, even though the story was the same that he told. It was his presence that has shifted. And as you were saying, we really trust people who are calm and grounded.
Yeah.
And thoughtful. And part of what you were saying too, to summarize everything so far, is I teach what you do, which is there's a communication sweet spot, which is the warmth and the competence.
Absolutely.
Right? So storytelling, right? It's how we become closer to people. We tell our story, we're sharing, it's connecting. And then competence is we have that gravitas, we dress in a certain way, our pace. Can you tell us a little bit about that sweet spot and how we can embody that in our communication?
You said it perfectly, and that's one of my lessons: warmth and competence. Look, and it is a little gender related, but think about the leaders that you admire the most, and the ones who come in frantic or arrogant or critical. We might be afraid of them, and we might want to do well, and they might get us inspired in a negative, scared way, but we don't really feel good about it. And then if you have a leader who is really all warmth and fuzzy, and that's really lovely too, but we tend to think, do they have the goods to back them up? So a lot of it in executive presence, how to use it, is that sweet spot of knowing your content really well. But it's how do you deliver the content? Do you deliver it in a way that's thoughtful, that includes the people in the audience, saying things like, now I know some of you are thinking this, or many of you already know this, but for those who don't, I'm going to share this now. It's really thinking of your audience's needs. How are you landing on them? And we'll talk about branding and reputation in a little while, but you can think you're being a certain way. But if you're landing on someone differently and they're taking you in differently, there's a big disconnect. And you won't be seen in as a positive role. Like, you have to be self-aware. Honestly, my go-to is I always think, how do I want to be talked to? How do I want to be taught to? How do I want to be treated? Because I was such a sensitive kid growing up and nobody believes it. They think I was out of the womb as an extrovert. And I am an introvert. I flex to ambivert now, but I hid behind my mom's skirt. I cried all the time, got off a mean word, would like send me in a spiral. And I just don't want to ever make anyone else feel less than. And I think that's my origin story of why I try to communicate in a very sensitive way to make sure everyone feels seen and heard. But if you ask me my brand, my sweet spot, I would say my brand is I'm blunt, but I'm really caring. So being a New Yorker, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm going to identify the issue and the problem. But I'm also going to celebrate what I think you do really well. And I'm going to say, look, this is so great, but this could be holding you back. Let's see how we can work on that. So I don't want anyone to feel diminished. And I think a good leader is someone who has that sweet spot where they inspire and they're honest. And people feel like, you know what, I'm not alone. This leader cares and is in the trench with us. They're not way up here and we're way down there. Does that answer your question? I know I went a little bit.
No, it does. It's so powerful. And I think we get away with being more direct when the person knows we care. We're doing it in service of them, of the relationship. So I always like to say warm first, then competence.
Yeah, I agree.
Really?
I think that's a good opening for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think staying on the executive presence theme here, it's a really fascinating thing because as I'm hearing the way that you're describing it, we all can benefit from having executive presence. We don't need to be quote unquote an executive to see the benefit in our lives of having this gravitas and these qualities that you mentioned. And I remember I was running a program a while back with maybe 50 non-executives, and it was a lot about personal growth type training. But one of the things that I had them do for 3 weeks was wear their best clothes every day, that they needed to look and dress like amazing. They needed to shave. It was mostly men. They needed to shave. They needed to groom themselves. They needed to wear their best shoes. Like, even if they were just like flopping around the house and working from home. And it was unbelievable, the changes that happened from that experiment. Just like, it counts, right? Like what we put out externally as you're sharing also counts. A lot of times we get focused on our own mind and our own growth and our own kind of internal mechanisms, but using the force of our appearance and some of these things that we're doing also works really well. So I love this thread of conversation. And my question around it is that we did a bunch of research. You have so much gifts to share here that having executive presence can also help when dealing with difficult people. And we heard you say that you should meet the fire with a warm blanket. Can you share more about that and how that works?
Absolutely. I am sure you have met a person, whether it's at work, in your personal life, in a family, where they are difficult, they're angry, they're blaming you, they're in a state, let's call it that, right? And they could say something really awful to you. And all of a sudden you're like, that's not fair. And they're like, well, you've done this, or how dare you, or this. And what happens is this person who's agitated is looking for a fight. They are looking for an excuse and a reason to let go, right? And so in television for so many years, Good Morning America and The View, I'm going to be really candid, there are a lot of very explosive personalities. And something I learned early on was that I wasn't going to let someone's bad behavior dictate how I show up. And I wasn't going to take it personally because my mom taught me at a very young age, hurt people, right? And they're just showing that. So she always said, like, if someone's bullying you or someone's saying terrible things, think about maybe something's going on in their family, or maybe they're physically not feeling well, or maybe someone bullied them, and show empathy. So that always carried with me. So what Todd just said is if you meet someone fire with fire, it's a big conflagration. You're just making that fire bigger. But if you try this approach, and this is what It's like you take a beat, let them rant or whatever and say, you seem really upset. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help you? Or, you seem really upset. Tell me, what is going on? And what ends up happening when you approach them that way, even if it's a bitter pill for you, is the wind goes out of their sails. They were not expecting that. They were expecting to go toe to toe with you. And all of a sudden you're like offering them empathy, which is really what they want. And they'll say, I didn't meet my deadline and this person's angry at me. And you're like, that sounds terrible. Can I help in any way? You mentioned that you weren't happy with this. How can I work on that with you? And you will turn this kind of enemy into someone who is a friend, who appreciates it. Now, will it work every time? Maybe not, but for me, it's worked every time. But let's give it a good odds of like 90% of the time. If you just have an angry person who just wants to fight with you, I always make it professional and I'll say something like, you seem so upset and I don't think this is the best way to talk and I don't feel comfortable talking with you now. I'm going to walk away right now and why don't we take a break and we'll come back and talk about this in a professional way. And so it's never like you're being, excuse my language, you're being an asshole, right? Or you're being a jerk. Like I don't ever say personal things. I say professional things. Like we're in front of a lot of people and this isn't professional. Why don't we go in the room over here? So that's what I always keep in my head. Empathy, warm blanket, and problem solving, but in professional terms. Does that make sense?
It's so good. And how you're saying it is so beautiful. There is really nothing to fight back against, right? It's very diffusing. A lot of us can have trouble with, we get very triggered, right? Or we just want to respond, or we naturally become defensive or tighten. How do you think about what you do? Like, what is that mastery that allows you to stay calm? And then I think also your tone was really apparent in that case too. So how do you maintain that real composure and mastery?
None of you have seen me as a mom where if someone's bullied my kid, my head is spinning around and I'm vomiting green pea soup. I am like the worst mama bear. So I am a hypocrite. And there are times when, and there's a little road rage at times, but in a professional setting where my reputation is at stake or where I want to consistently show up, I've just trained myself to like, let it happen. Let it happen. And then look at them and realize like, they're not all bad. They're going through something. Anyone who comes in and is like picking fights, it's about them. It is nothing about you. I had a boss who would come in and he'd like storm through the hallways, right? And then he'd go into his office, which was all glass. This was at an interactive TV company. And he'd like be on the phone and he'd hang it up and he'd gesticulate. Got it right. And everyone's looking, right? Do you know what we're all thinking? What did I do wrong? Like we all personalized it. And this jerk didn't care. He loved the drama of it all. So he was a perfect example of someone that if he was agitated, I would just be calm and calmer. So how do I do it? I try to think empathetically like, boy, this person's struggling today. It's not about me. Maybe I can help. And if I don't want to do it, I will just say, you know what, this doesn't work for me right now. I know you're going through something, but please seek me out later. So this is my rule. I don't want anyone to feel diminished in any way. That's not a victory for me, even if they deserve it, because that says more about me then. And I know we can't all be so altruistic, but I feel the same way about negotiations and meetings. I believe in solving for fairness. So if we're trying to come to some sort of collaboration or compromise and one person feels cheated and leaves the table feeling like they didn't get something they needed, I don't feel good about it. That's going to be equally as painful for me. I want 2 parties or 3 parties to leave and all of us feel like we were heard, seen, and that we got something that we wanted, even if we all had to compromise. Yeah. That's me. That's my own personality. I'm not saying all of you have to be that way, but I think it helps in leadership. I think it makes people feel safe.
What I love about what you just shared is that you also, when you said, I'm a hypocrite, like that's so powerful because we can hear all the best things and great wisdom, right, in this conversation. And then at times we are also not acting in the way that we're talking about. And that's just human, right? There's such a trust and an integrity part of that when you share that. Because before we got started this officially, you're a New Yorker and I'm a New Yorker. And I've really been watching how you speak is such a slow pace, right? I feel that you would really train yourself. Good. I've had to learn that as well, moving out to California. People speak and walk much slower out here. You should have seen me my first year. I was running circles around people and people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm a New Yorker, is what I do. But I can really see the benefit of that. And in the mama bear situation, this other part comes out.
Todd, first of all, I think I was right on that track with you.
Mm-hmm.
I first got out here. I'm like, come on, I'll hide behind the counter. I'm much more efficient. My child was being bullied in middle school. It was terrible. I confronted the parents. I was in the principal's office every day. They wouldn't do anything about it. And when I'd go to pick up my son, I would stare at this kid, like give him this evil eye, right? Eventually, about a month later, the principal called me in and she's, Allison, Bodhi's saying that you stare at him and you give him and I said, absolutely, every single day. I said, because no one's doing anything. And she's like, if you keep staring at him, you're banned. You're banned from the campus. And I said, okay, I'll stop staring at him. But that's me. So I'm not perfect. I'm really passionate. I have a thing with injustice. But we all we're all hypocrites is what I'm saying. And we all figure out but I think in a workplace, and I think we're talking about that, but in relationships too, you will find more success with the softer, more balanced approach. But then as Todd said, there are going to be moments in our life where we're not the best version of ourselves. And then that's when you apologize. And there's where the transparency comes in. I didn't get enough sleep, or you know what you said really upset me and I didn't process it well. And I'm embarrassed that I said that in that way. I could have handled that better. I teach a class on apologies too and the power of it. And a student of mine a few weeks ago said, Allison, one of my other classes, Lauren, I think it's like leading with power, or I don't know which one it is. It's up and down power. But she's like, I was just told recently in a class that you should never apologize because it diminishes your strength and your power. Do you agree? And here's Todd, my New York. I'm like, do I tell the truth? And I said, I actually completely disagree. I said, with respect to that teacher, and I said, I'm going to have a class on it. I said, I think an apology is one of the most powerful tools in accountability and building bridges and healing a hurt. And I said, I don't think it diminishes you if you admit a wrong. I think it builds trust. So again, my point of view, not necessarily everybody's, maybe you can all find a middle ground of a little bit of sticking to your guns and then a little bit of softness.
I think so much of it too is where are we coming from? Like, are we coming from fear, or you could call it love in this case? Sometimes we apologize because we're afraid the person will be upset with us. It's not a strong apology of I'm admitting I was wrong here and I'm taking self-responsibility. Because a lot of what you're talking about is integrity and respect for another. So when we are in the wrong, that repair is really powerful. It does build trust. And I think what you're saying too, when someone's really angry at work, that compassion, I loved when I heard the origin of the word respect is to see. When we respect someone, we really see them.
Yeah.
So you see this person in front of you is actually hurt and you have compassion and you stay calm and you don't take it personally. But I'm also appreciating with your son, it is also from love, right? You're like, I'm protective and this is so from love. So it's actually the same root in both cases. So you do that so brilliantly. And I also appreciate you mentioned hurt people. And in our research of you had so many beautiful gems of wisdom. Two of them I really liked are when you're hurt or sad, help someone else, which I really liked. And then opt in and then figure it out. Can you share a little about those two?
Sure. So the first one, again, came from my mom. My mom should be immortalized with a statue because she doesn't realize how wise she is. But when I was sad growing up or felt disappointed, she'd say, why don't you go do something nice for somebody? Say something nice or write them a note or do something. And it's going to make you feel so much better. And so I grew up with this philosophy of take myself out of my own pain and disappointment and do something nice. And honestly, it always made me feel so much better. And this interesting story that I've shared, I think you might have, Lauren, is I was at my summer camp. They sent, I don't know if Todd was sent this way, but we were sent to sleepaway camp at a very early age, right? For 2 months when I was 7.
Me too. Same thing. 7 years old with the sleepaway camp for 2 months.
Right. I would never send my kids away at 7.
Way.
We loved it. I don't know why, but we did, but it was early. And I was a few years in and I tried out for this play, Godspell. And I had been in Peter Pan the year before as Wendy, and I thought I killed it. And I tried out for this play, and not only did I not get a role, I wasn't even chosen for the chorus. And I had these illusions of grandeur that I was a Broadway star. And so I go back to my cabin, and I'm sitting on my bed, and my counselor comes, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I didn't get into the play, and I wanted it so badly. I can't believe they didn't choose me. I was Wendy last year." And she's like, "I understand, Allison." She's like, "The kids in bunk 2, they're actually trying to put on a play. Why don't you go there, and why don't you help them?" And I'm like, "Okay." And I went to bunk 2, and for the next 2 weeks, every day I helped them with costumes, with rehearsal, with direction, with encouraging them, with doing lines. It was such a wonderful project. And what ironically happened was the play went great, and I was awarded Girl of the Week of my camp, which out of 200 students, 200 campers, they pick a camper who embodies the spirit, right, of a good camper. Shocked. And I heard the origin story was they were so impressed with how I went and helped this younger group of kids. It's such a bigger story for me because one, there's the lesson of I completely forgot about my disappointment by doing something of service and bringing joy and inspiring. But it was the first step in leadership, like being recognized as a leader at my summer camp. For me to make a niche for myself, for me to take the lead. And after that, I became like color war captain and a lot of different awards. And so when people say like, where did you come from that shy kid to this kind of more extroverted person? I cite summer camp, Todd, as like the first place that I was able to grow and learn. So the lesson really is that you will feel better and pull yourself out of your own disappointment when you serve someone else. And I think that's really healing.
I'm going to have to ask what camp you went to.
I went to Kenwood in Kent, Connecticut.
Okay. I know. Yeah. I went to Camp Starlight in Pennsylvania.
Oh, very nice.
But same thing. I mean, and actually before that I was 7, my parents sent me for 1 month when I was 6. And I have a 6-year-old now, and I just can't imagine different generation. I turned out okay. So
we survived, but
yeah, it is a little bit insane to think about that. And so just quick time check here. We're almost at the end of this official interview, and we have kind of one more question. And again, we're just so grateful. I think there's been so much wisdom dropped. I've been taking notes myself about how I can kind of go aligned with some of the things that you've been sharing. And we're also going to, if it's okay with you, stay on the line for a little bit longer. And we have some of our members here live on the call that can ask a question or two. That would be truly wonderful. If you're listening to this, Lauren and I have an online program, and some of the members get to be on these live calls and listen in to these amazing speakers that we do. And so they'll be asking some questions. And we always like to end these conversations with the question of given everything that you've learned and everything that you share with us today, and I know there's a lot more that you have here, obviously. If you were advising your younger self, what advice or wisdom would you share?
I would say, don't be afraid to be yourself, and that you will figure it out. To Lauren's question, which I did not answer, which was opting in and figuring it out. All of us want to be perfect, and we want a guarantee of success. And one of the biggest hurdles for all of us, more often women than men, is because we haven't done something. We are like, nah, that's not me. And I want to encourage everybody, and I wish I'd encourage myself, is like opt in, take the opportunity, try something new, because the deliverable is never 5 minutes from then. So if someone says, are you interested in this project, or do you want to join us on this trip, or, do you want to lead this? Many times we're like, well, that's not me. I've never done it. No, thank you. What I'm going to say is say yes, and you'll figure it out. You'll ask questions, you'll research, you'll fill in the learning gaps, and you will excel because you'll want to do well. And that is how you create more opportunities. And as a shy kid and someone who doubted myself, I wish someone had encouraged me to take the leap before I felt that I was forced to do it.
I want to echo that, because that was personally probably the biggest unlock for me in my life. Like very early in my career, I went to law school, not a fit. I transitioned to coaching and teaching. I got that same advice from someone else who taught at Stanford. And so I started saying yes. And then, like you said, I had weeks or months to figure it out, and I always did. And so we're so much more resourceful than we realize. So just say yes, and then put your heart into it. And I think you amaze yourself, and then you realize what you're capable of. Then the world really opens up to you.
It's a trickle effect, Lauren.
Yeah.
And I really believe like we're capable of anything. And women, forgive me for Robert, I see you're there. I don't want to, but I for women in general, like we avoid things, and yet we are so powerful and so capable. And I just want you to have more faith in yourself. And no one's looking for us to fail. They're very interested in themselves. Realize that if not you, then who? I love to say that. Why not you? Why can't you do it? Of course you can do it.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It's really just the frequency of being fearless and just understanding that we're just here for this short period of time in this life. And we take it so seriously, our lives, our situations, our work, our relationships, our money, our health. We're so in it on ourselves. And this is why we started this podcast, Allison, was because it's just the reminder that there's more to untap here. There's much more potential that we all have. And it really starts with getting rid of the limited thinking, the limited mindset. Even if it's old habitual thought patterns or subconscious or whatever you want to call it, it's like, no, we have today, we have right now, and we can go for it. And I think you just embody that, which is why this conversation is so great, that just that fearless attitude and energy just then creates magic.
Thank you so much, Todd. Thank you, Lauren. Such amazing questions from you and Todd. I appreciate you're such pros. And so it's such a pleasure to answer your questions and have you also synthesize what I say. So thank you both so much. And I'm just very grateful for the people who are willing to listen. I really appreciate your time. So thank you.